when you think about recruiting a student, you're putting marketing towards that. You're making these really polished pieces. And then when a student gets on campus, suddenly the comms get really fragmented. They are different things from different offices at different times with different levels of expertise in marketing and communications. And so the student gets these sort of fragmented overload of information, sometimes that contradicts each other. Getting a marketing team involved can really help you kind of take that whole journey and bring it together in a way that makes the end user, the student, be at the center. So if we stop thinking about our silos and our territory and start thinking about the student and putting them really at the heart, what benefits them most? Something that's well communicated, something that's synced up across campus, something that's really clear, something that has a message that resonates with them, that drives them toward that action. And that's what marketing does for a living. That's our job.
That was Jaime Hunt, former CMO at a few different higher ed institutions and now consulting with institutions at Solve Higher Ed, also the host of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, and the author of Heart Over Hype. I really enjoyed our conversation about the huge role and often unsung role that marketing can play in student success. We talked about how it can increase alignment within the institution, how it can increase awareness among students about support services and opportunities, how it can destigmatize or normalize getting help with things like advising or tutoring or counseling. We also talked about how the expertise marketing folks have in recruiting can really be leveraged for retention. And we both get on our silo busting soapboxes too. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Connected College podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and how they're organized to enable student success. And if you're a leader in higher ed and you think that the silos and separations get in the way of student success, then this podcast and my book, The Connected College, are for you. We're here to learn and work together to bust silos, question tradition, and forge partnerships so that students feel connected to their college, their community, their coursework, and their careers.
Welcome, Jaime, to the Connected College podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to having a great conversation. And I think a great place to start is how you got started. Tell us a little bit about your journey in higher ed. I know you've worked with institutions, for institutions, everything in between.
Yeah. So I started out my career as a journalist, and then I pivoted accidentally into higher education in 2004. I started working at a small private school in Minneapolis. And once I got into it, I realized I loved it. Like it fed that idealism that as a journalist I had, where it's like, I need to feel like I'm doing something that is making the world a better place. And so for about 20 years, I worked in higher education, the last decade or so, as a vice president and chief marketing officer at 3 different institutions: Winston-Salem State, Miami University of Ohio. People always ask me how Florida is. I don't know. And then most recently at Old Dominion University. And then a year ago, I ended up pivoting and opening a consulting firm that's focused entirely on higher ed and doing primarily marketing and enrollment marketing type of work and AI consulting. And then I also teach at West Virginia University. So I'm still at an institution. I couldn't give it up entirely. And I teach higher ed marketing and I teach emerging media in the market. So a lot of AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of that kind of stuff. And I love it.
I love that journey. And the starting off in journalism, I'm sure gave you a key eye for communications and research and context and culture. And yeah, we have some interesting intersections. The Minneapolis one, that's where I'm now, although I'm not at a small independent school. But one of my favorite projects was a library organizational planning project for Miami, Ohio.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know if we were there at the same time, but we helped create a new service model, helping the library think through what do students need, what services can better support them, and then how do we organize our folks to best deliver the services.
Oh, that's so awesome. Did
Yeah,
you work with Jerome Connolly?
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's not very often that your library dean was also a mayor. And
super cool guy.
yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. That, like, Jerome, it was worth showing up to his meetings just to hear his opening remarks.
100%. Yeah, I got lunch with him a couple of times and he's a riot.
Yeah. Shout out to Jerome. So I'm interested, given that our theme is student success, and I know that's something you're passionate about, I'd love to hear your definition of student success.
Yeah. So I come at it from probably a different lens than like a person who works directly in student success. But I see student success as when a student is achieving what the goal is that they're trying to accomplish by enrolling in college. So for most students, that's going to be graduating. But I also think I see it also as having belonging wrapped into that and having feeling like they have accomplished their academic goals too. So it's not just that piece of paper or just that credential that they're leaving with, but they're leaving with having a deep understanding of the subject matter that they studied, a deep sense of feeling like they were part of a community, a sense of belonging, and then like a sense of who they are as people. Because I think as institutions, we do more than offer a credential. We provide the sort of whole person knowledge, right? As part of the college experience, that whole growth of yourself as a human being. And so I think if we look at it as just student success means they leave with a credential, that's too narrow. And it leaves out a big part of what we do and probably one of the most important parts of what we do.
It sounds like for you, student success isn't just the destination, it's the journey, right? It's not just the graduation or the credential, but it's how you get there. And did you feel like you were part of something and maybe working towards something bigger? I really appreciate that. I think that belonging is foundational. And we just see that as such a core part of how students succeed. And I think when you look at when students stop out, second really only to finances is the belonging piece, right? So, given your expertise in marketing, I'd love to hear a little bit about the connection between marketing and student success. Like, what role can marketing play in increasing student success?
Yeah. So when I was at Winston-Salem State, I was there 2015 to 2020 as their chief marketing officer. And I got there and the university had probably more of a focus on student success even than on recruitment. And so I began to see that marketing needed to play a really important role in making sure students were successful. And it was an HBCU. It was a place where students were cultivating that confidence that they were going to need to go out into the working world, to become who they really were, to become the leaders that they really were. And my department actually decided to make retention and graduation and student success the pillars of the work that we did. And so part of that is doing things like communicating the offerings, the tutoring offerings, the student orientation, the student activities, all of that stuff. But I think even bigger than that is cultivating that sense of community and that sense of we have your back and we're here to help you and support you throughout your journey. And then also like doing things like destigmatizing accessing mental health resources, destigmatizing accessing tutoring, working with the various student success offices to see what is the barrier to getting students to actually engage in some of these programs and how can marketing and communication help overcome those barriers. And I think the magic of Winston-Salem State was that it was like we all got that that was why we were there. And it was such a beautiful harmony that we were all singing from that same sheet of music that it was like, this isn't just about getting students in the door and it isn't just about getting them credentials. It's also having them leave like super confident and super, super aware of who they are as people and to feel accomplished in what they did. Like they should be achieving more than their dreams, right? And so when we were able to bridge some of those silos and work really closely with the student success offices to help them, I think that allowed us to open doors for students that made them more successful, if that makes sense. Like it made them tap into those resources at a level that was higher, stronger, better, more impactful.
So many great contributions. It starts with the internal communication that leads to alignment and making those connections and busting the silos so everybody understands the students and what they need and what they're experiencing. But then once you do that, which is, I think, no small feat, then you're helping students become more aware of what support's there, what opportunities are there, the campus, the community, the culture, and then crucially, that it's for them, that there's nothing wrong with seeking help. And I really love that last part. I've been sneaking, or maybe not sneaking, support services into libraries for almost 2 decades now, with the idea that, like, let's use libraries as student success hubs and meet students
Mm-hmm.
where they are and blend study and support, so you normalize getting help. And it's like everybody goes to the writing center, right? Or everybody goes to the
Mm-hmm.
tutoring center, because who doesn't want to take better notes or better manage their time? Who doesn't want to have more free time or more time to take care of themselves? And I think marketing plays such a key role in that. So as you did that, what were some of your success stories, and what were some of the metrics associated with that as you were helping with alignment and awareness and normalization of help?
One of the things that we did, and I worked really closely with the AVP of enrollment management, Joel Lee, we created this cross campus group that had literally every office on campus have a representative. And we didn't just have like deans and directors, we had like the front desk people, like the people who are on the true front lines of interacting with students. And we brought them together to really map out, what does the student journey look like? What does it look like for them to get communications from financial aid, or from what does their bill look like? What does the letter saying you missed a payment look like? And really scope out, how can we make sure that these touch points are not just driving them to a single action, but driving to them to that fulsome look at being a successful student at the university, and hoping to help have the community of staff and faculty see themselves as part of that journey. So through that effort, Joel and he had a team that ended up transitioning to me. We implemented way back in 2017 an AI chatbot that was actually geared for retention. We called it a retention bot. And it was geared toward answering those questions that current students have. And I think we were one of the first schools to have a bot that was really for current students, because most schools think about it as answering those admissions questions. But we had it for current students, and then we backed it up and had it for students who were admitted through coming on board. And one of the challenges that we saw is students were coming unprepared. So they didn't have their immunizations done. They didn't have their bills paid. They had a ton of questions. They were showing up on campus and they were already behind in terms of checking off those things on the checklists that they needed to do in order to even be a student. And that retention bot was able to help them answer the questions that they needed to answer if they were stuck on a step, but it was also able to push out messages to them and nudges. And one of the things that we saw over time was something like a 36% reduction in phone calls to those enrollment management offices, because those questions were being answered. And instead, the students were able to engage with more of those high touch. So the different counselors, advisors, or whatever were able to, instead of answering like the basic questions, this bot could do that and they could answer the more complex questions. And I want to say we saw a growth in overall enrollment, which didn't necessarily come from freshmen. It came from a combination of freshmen and retaining students of 8% or something like that, which is pretty significant. It was like, it translated to 90-ish students, if I remember correctly. So another thing that we did is WSSU invested in EAB Navigate, which is, I don't know what it's called now, but it was a tool that is really designed to help students with success. It has like early warning systems. It had connections to advisors. They could make appointments, communicate with their advisors. Faculty had access to it. So when you transition from professional advisors to your faculty advisors, everything was all in there. And we did a massive marketing campaign. I want to call out Ashley Jones, who worked for me at the time, who helped work on that. And we ended up with something like an 86% adoption rate among first year students with that campaign in 7 days. So in the first 7 days of school, 86% of students downloaded that application to their phone. And so that to me is proof of, when marketing can get involved in some of these efforts, you can start to really see the needle move. And certainly, you can be successful without marketing. But if you bring us to the table and have us be helping, we can amplify that even further and get even bigger results, which is the goal everybody wants.
I really appreciate those results. And I'm a believer in how you got there and in the role that marketing can play. I feel like as someone with a background in design, sometimes people are dismissive of design as it's not the real work. It's like the pretty pictures or whatever. Sure, you get that. And there's preconceptions about, we don't need a snappy title for this. Why would we have marketing at the table? What would you say to those folks that maybe don't appreciate the fullness of what you could offer?
Oh gosh, I'd say so many things. Most of them good. I think in a certain way, it's really natural, right? To be like, no, I can just do this myself. And I think about when you think about recruiting a student, you're putting marketing towards that. You're making these really polished pieces. And then when a student gets on campus, suddenly the comms get really fragmented. They are different things from different offices at different times with different levels of expertise in marketing and communications. And so the student gets these sort of fragmented overload of information, sometimes that contradicts each other. Getting a marketing team involved can really help you kind of take that whole journey and bring it together in a way that makes the end user, the student, be at the center. So if we stop thinking about our silos and our territory and start thinking about the student and putting them really at the heart, what benefits them most? Something that's well communicated, something that's synced up across campus, something that's really clear, something that has a message that resonates with them, that drives them toward that action. And that's what marketing does for a living. That's our job. And so if you bring the people in that have that expertise to augment the subject matter expertise that you have in whatever student success initiative you're responsible for, and you combine those two things, that's where the magic happens. When those silo walls break down and suddenly you have this bigger group of people working towards the same goal, you're in a much better place. And I often describe it, and I describe it in my book as you're a dog sled. And if everybody's pulling that sled in the same direction, you get this momentum and the sled just glides. And dogs are able to pull this sled for hundreds of miles, right? Imagine if those dogs are all pulling in different directions. The sled's not going anywhere. It's bouncing around. Everybody's frustrated. And that's how universities operate. It's like everybody's just pulling in different weird directions and you're just bouncing around and not going anywhere. And that's not what we want. That's not what we need. We need to move things in a united way to best serve our student.
I agree with all of that. And I'm thinking about it must be more and more difficult to get the dog sled moving in the same direction and swiftly, given how complicated it is. There's more channels, there's shorter attention spans, there are more silos and structures that get in the way, and ever more systems that we can't even keep up with the name of them. So what's on your list of things that are changing about marketing and how it can increase student success?
We're certainly at a point in time when what students want and need has changed a lot. Student expectations have shifted, particularly since the pandemic. How students consume information has changed a lot. But in a lot of cases, we're playing in the same playbook as an institution, right? We're doing things the way we've always done them. We're not necessarily breaking any boundaries or doing anything unique. I think marketing has to stay at the forefront in the recruitment effort, right? So we have to stay aware of what is the best way to reach students because oftentimes we're investing sometimes millions of dollars, right? Okay, so all that expertise that we develop in those changing expectations of communications and marketing and outreach, that we don't have to just apply that towards recruitment. We can be applying that same knowledge, that same expertise about what students want, expect, and need to student success initiatives as well. So as students' needs change, as they're like, we want more video-based content, we're not opening and reading our emails. We're not doing things the way we've always done them. We don't want to go to events anymore. We want virtual events or fill in the blank. As marketers on the recruitment side, spending millions of dollars, we have to know that. So let us apply that knowledge to student success as well. And it changes so fast that probably by the time you air this episode, what reaches students is going to have shifted again.
Will we have TikTok or not? Who knows?
Right. But I think the point that I'm making is that marketers have to stay at the forefront of that. And because of the heavy investments we're making in advertising and marketing on the recruitment side, let us apply that on the retention side as well.
What I'm hearing is if at the root of marketing is understanding people.
Yes.
And helping keep the student at the center in how you communicate, whether it's about a course or a club or a career path. And if things are changing, who better to help you figure out who students are and how their needs are changing than your marketing team who's trying to reach them and understand them. And what advice do you have? Let's say you've got people convinced, they're like, we need marketing at the table to enable student success. We want internal alignment. We want student awareness. We want normalization and destigmatization of engagement and opportunities and support services. Now, how do you do it? You've got them interested. Now, how do you do it and help them adapt to these changes?
I think that student success is existential, right? Like we cannot succeed if our students don't succeed. If our students drop out, if our students stop out, if they leave, right, that has a major impact on revenue. And as we're in the midst of an enrollment cliff, communicating to a marketing office that might not actually have ever worked on retention initiatives before, to kind of get that hook to get them to want to be involved, in order to overcome the challenge that comes with that enrollment cliff and the challenge that comes with a decrease in the number of students that are available to recruit, we need to focus on keeping the students we get, right? So we used to be able to just shovel students in like coal. Oh, more students, shovel them in, like more and more. We'll just bring more in on the front end. And what happens on the back end? Ugh. But now we need to be really worried about the back end because every student that stays is X amount of dollars. And every 10 students that saved is X hundreds of thousands of dollars, and fill in the blank. And so I think approaching a marketing office with, hey, retention is about enrollment growth. You can grow your overall enrollment by retaining students. And so maybe if you're having challenges on the recruitment side and pressures on the recruitment side, don't put all your eggs in the recruitment basket. Put some eggs in the student success basket. Because if you have a 1% increase in retention, that's X hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you have a 10%, that's X hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then also convincing your chief marketing officer, that also impacts your reputation. It impacts your rankings, unfortunately or fortunately. But student success plays a role in reputation and rankings. And those are typically KPIs that marketers are looking at too. So I think making that case is a good way to approach it.
I love the examples you shared earlier about the cross-functional group to map the campus journey and the chatbot and the advising platform. What are some other examples, some of your favorite examples of helping folks adapt to change and increase student success?
I'm so glad you asked that question because this is one of my soapboxes. I think parents are an untapped resource here. I recently worked with a client, so I don't have any outcomes yet because they've just put these in place now. I recently worked with clients on building out a parent-focused retention and persistence and retention campaign. So how can we harness parents as our allies in helping their students be successful? So making sure that parents understand the resources that are available to students, making sure that they know, how to handle if they have a roommate conflict. How can the parent help counsel and coach their student through those issues? If their student's feeling homesick or feels like they don't belong, how can a parent help with that? And parents are changing. I'm Gen X. My parents basically were like, we'll see you in 4 years. Like there was no further conversation. The parents of Gen Z and Gen Alpha are much more engaged. Families are very different. They're much more democratic. They're much more involvement from parents in decision making. And mostly healthy ways. And so why are we not leveraging them? And I'm fairly convinced it's because all of us at the leadership level had parents who just kicked us out and were like, see you in 4 years, if that. And so we don't think about parents as being allies, but parents want their kid to be successful.
Yeah,
They
and they want to
want
be
to be
involved.
engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about webinars for parents about here's how you help your kid through these types of challenges, website resources, downloads, newsletters, parent groups. They're honestly going to probably be more engaged with the content that you send out than their student is. Because their students also thinking about their social life.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And my first book, How to Get the Most Out of College, was really written for students, but it turns out it's mostly the parents that read it. I've thought about rewriting it basically for the parent audience because I think it just makes so much sense. And in the Connected College, one of the people I interviewed, Cedric Howard, an enrollment management guru, he had the same advice: partner with parents because A, they want to be involved, B, they're not always informed, and you can really make a dent because they may think college is pretty similar to how it was when they went. And so they, even though they might want to be engaged or might want to be helpful, they might not have the information or the context to do it. And I agree, it's an untapped resource and a win-win.
And I think it gives parents a really good taste in their mouth for the school, right? Because it's like they start to see the school as their partner in helping their kid be successful versus like just a place, just this like faceless place. So I'm seeing more schools having director of family programs, but having comms around that, having a whole comms strategy around that, I think is just like one more layer that you can do to keep those parents engaged.
One thing we haven't talked about yet relative to engagement, we talked about the role that belonging plays in student success. And we've talked about getting students engaged and getting parents engaged. And I would love to hear a little bit about how the brand and how that brand is communicated and how people live that brand and breathe it. How does that contribute to belonging? I feel like there must be a whole body of work out there about this kind of connection and another way that marketing can help even contribute to that sense of belonging, even in a literal sense, right? You're wearing the college sweatshirt and you're branding the person, right? Talk to us a little bit about brand and belonging in higher ed.
I think brand is really unsung as a driver for belonging and a driver for student success. I think we think about brand as being like logos and pretty images and taglines and things like that. And we don't think about brand as the way somebody feels about you. And that's how I see brand. I see brand as like that emotion that somebody attaches to who you are. And I think that when I look at a place like WSSU, when I got there, only 42% of students said that it was their first choice school. And when I did focus groups with students, they felt like very much like this was my fallback to my fallback. This was a place that wasn't at the top of my list. And if a student has that attitude coming into it,
They're starting off behind,
yeah,
like you were talking about with the forms.
yes,
You mentioned they show up behind.
yeah,
And this is just another example of that. They're showing up without that engagement.
yeah. So if they hit one moment of friction or one moment of feeling like they don't belong, they're much more likely to say, I'm done. I'm transferring out. I'm dropping out. College isn't for me. This school isn't for me. This class isn't for me. This whatever isn't for me, and step out. Versus if they're jazzed, if they're pumped up to go to the school, if they're walking around in that shirt when they're seniors and juniors in high school, maybe even from the 8th grade, they're totally pumped and excited about it. I think they're going to be putting a lot more effort toward their education, right? Because they're like, I want to be here. I'm excited. I think they're going to feel that they're going to see others with that same energy. They're going to bring that energy to campus. They're going to feel part of something bigger than who they are. And that fosters that sense of belonging. And I think that if they do hit those friction points, because no campus is perfect, there's going to be mistakes made, they're more likely to forgive those. And then one last benefit of that is when I was at Winston-Salem State, we got our alumni really actively engaged on social media. And so every single time a student posted that they got into WSSU, they would have dozens of alumni welcoming them to the RAM family. As current students, welcome to the RAM family. You're going to love it here. You're going to, this is going to be the place for you.
That's
They had
amazing.
belonging before they started. It was amazing.
That's amazing.
It was
Well,
a great place to work.
Yeah. And it sounds like you did great work. And I like the idea of getting beyond the logos and the taglines to the essence of the brand as that emotional connection between the student and the institution and the community they're a part of is foundational. And that's one of the 6 connections I talk about in the book, and really is what ties the others together. Because you're right, if something does go wrong, and it's more like when, right? Because there are always hurdles, there are always setbacks. Like you want that sense of attachment that builds more resilient communities where they feel like they're part of something and they're willing to fight for it and fight for themselves. And I think that's what we all aspire to.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things was if a student posted a criticism of something on Twitter, at that time, Twitter was like the social platform. If a student posted a criticism, other students would come in and be like, we don't talk bad about our school on social media. This is an internal conversation. This isn't out inside the house convo. This is not where we air our dirty laundry. And I was like, these kids are awesome. That wasn't the case when I first got there. But by the time I left, they were like,
They had that sense of
we're
pride.
not doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were. And that, I think that sense of pride just naturally means they have a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Why would you be proud of a place you don't belong?
The Venn diagram of that, it's got to be almost 2 perfectly overlapping
Right.
circles
Right.
between pride and belonging. Such interesting stuff, Jamie. Any final words of advice you have for folks on how to embrace the role that marketing can play in increasing student success?
My biggest thing is get away from those silos. Stop talking about mine. Start talking about ours. Stop talking about me. Start talking about we. Look for opportunities to do overlapping work. Look for ways to bring in departments, not even from marketing. How can housing help contribute to student success? How can financial aid? How can the registrar's office? How can the landscapers help create a feeling of belonging on campus? Just stop thinking about what you can control and what's in your territory and think about what you could do as a larger organization. And if you are in a position of leadership, I would say you have an imperative to start busting down those silos. And if you're not, this is the time to start making that case to your leadership that those silos have to be busted. They don't serve our students. Silos do not serve our students.
Yeah, students don't want silos. They just want support and success.
Mm-hmm.
We can make it happen. And it is all the way from the front line, landscape, custodial, dining hall to the senior administration. And I love how you highlighted that a couple of times today. Jamie, thank you so much for these great insights on how to create better connected colleges and universities and enable student success.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And where can folks find you online if they want to learn more?
So my consulting business is called Solve Higher Ed, and you can find me online at solvehighered.com or Jamie at Solve Higher Ed. I'm also the author of Heart Over Hype, Transforming Higher Ed Marketing with Empathy. You can learn more about that and get your own copy at heartoverhypebook.com.
Thank you so much.
This was fantastic. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Subscribe to my Connected College newsletter at elliottfelix.com for insights and excerpts from my upcoming book, tools you can download, and special offers. You can also find more information about talks I've given, articles I've written, and upcoming events there. And please support the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where students will succeed.